Welcome back to the Outreach Project family. This is Josh.
This is Zach.
We are joined with...
I'm Rob Bergman.
This is Rob Bergman, Executive Pastor, First Church God, Columbia City. We are in the Bergman office.
We are. Welcome. Welcome to my office.
Oh, thank you.
Glad you guys are here.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, let's get started with what you do here at the church, what your role looks like.
Yeah, that is, I would say that's an often asked question. Yeah, where people will go, it usually sounds like this. So what do you do exactly? And fair enough. I think it's a fair question. So as the executive pastor, my responsibility is really connected to our staff. And I think a lot of times where the question comes from is because people don't realize that we're a pretty large church and have a pretty large staff, including preschool teachers. There's a little over 30 staff people that work here part-time and full-time. So I oversee the staff at a top level, the different directors of the different ministry areas. So I'm involved with them in their day-to-day jobs and what they're doing and how they're serving the church as a whole. So that's by and large what I do. And then I get a chance to preach sometimes and involved in some of the vision casting and the organization of the preaching schedule and how all that's working.
Yeah. How long have you been here?
I've been here for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, just over.
Quick.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it.
Yeah. And where did you live prior to Columbia City?
So I grew up in Columbia City.
Okay.
I was born in Dayton, Ohio. I was a baby when my family moved. It was a job switch. We moved to Columbia City, so then I lived in Columbia City until I graduated high school, and then moved to Central Kentucky to go to college. Went to Asbury University, studied theology. Out of college, then moved to the Indianapolis area and was a youth pastor there for 4 years. And then after that, we moved to St. Louis, and I was a pastor at a church in St. Louis for 15 years.
Wow.
And then we came to Columbia City.
All right.
Back to Columbia City, so kind of full circle.
When did Rachel join that picture?
So Rachel and I, we dated in high school.
Okay.
And then we ended up going to the same college. The story that I always tell is that we were in our senior year. We were dating. We knew it was time to begin to think through colleges. And we very much were saying what we need to do is we need to make some decisions on our own as individuals about where we wanted to go to school. And so we kind of stopped talking to each other about that. I knew some of the schools that were on her list. She knew some of the schools that were on my list. Some of them were the same. Some of them were different. And we did all of our visits and made our decision and kind of had a reveal to each other. And we both picked the same school. Wow. So we both ended up at Asbury University. So then we got married in college. And so she was in the picture in high school and then through college and on.
What did she study?
She studied elementary education.
Wow.
She was a teacher for a few years, and then she's had a number of different careers based on kind of our life circumstances. Mm-hmm. God's just been really faithful, and she is such an entrepreneur that she's been able to kind of do a bunch of different things. She taught for a little while, and then she worked at a gym, and then she started a business, an in-home personal training business, and then most recently for the last 5 or 6 years, she's been in real estate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of all over the place.
She's been all over, yep.
Yeah. So you guys both grew up in Columbia City. Do you want to start from what your life looked like growing up, and then kind of intertwine how you came to faith in that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Columbia City, and I grew up in a home that was for all intents and purposes, very irreligious. Just there was a void of any sort of faith, any sort of religion, like I remember as a small child, very young, going to like a midnight mass at a Catholic church, I think at St. Paul's, a couple of times, like at Christmas, maybe even just one time. Okay. So church was just nothing a part of our family. But it was a pretty volatile growing up. There's a lot of volatility in my home between my parents, and I think some substance abuse and some domestic violence kinds of things. I mean, it was just a rough home life, and so somewhere along the way, like I'd say between my 8th grade and freshman year, everything sort of came to a head, and my parents finally called it quits. And I say finally because it was like a multitude of times where my dad would leave, and are we getting it?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. We're good.
A multitude of times where my dad would leave, and my parents would separate, and then he would come back, and they would separate, and he would come back, and they would separate, and so then finally, when they did divorce, the marriage ended, and I was heading into high school, and it was a tough couple of years in those first couple of years of high school, because I've got now 2 parents who are in their own rights kind of licking their wounds, where my dad is gone, and really don't have a relationship with him anymore. My mom, I'm living with my mom, but she's just trying to pick up the pieces and figure out, what does life look like now? This is real. This is official. How do we make ends meet? How do we do this? And so for the first couple of years of high school, I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. Mm-hmm. And as I look back on those first few years of my freshman and sophomore year, I'm grateful that I think that God in many ways was protecting me, because I had all the freedom that I wanted, all the freedom a freshman or sophomore in high school could ever ask for, and I sort of just tested that, and it would be that I was supposed to be home at a certain time, and I would be home at that time, and then I would push that a little bit and maybe just be a little late and see what would happen, and nothing would happen. And then I would be like a lot late and nothing would happen. And then I would stay out most of the night and nothing would happen. And then I would just tell my mom that I was going to spend the night with some friends, and it was fine. And then eventually I wouldn't even say that I was going to go spend the night with friends. I would. And I realized over a really short period of time, I'm on my own. I can do whatever I want. And with that kind of freedom for a 15, 16-year-old, you could get into a lot of trouble. And thankfully, I didn't. I did a little bit. I didn't, but it wasn't a bunch of trouble. And but somewhere in the midst of, I think, my sophomore year of high school, hanging out with just a conglomerate of different people, and I just started looking around at my life, and I had this really interesting experience where one night it was like this, there's no better word for it than like this existential experience, where it was just like almost out of body experience, where I thought to myself, there has to be more to life than this. As like a 16-year-old, I somehow was able to look into the future and see the trajectory of life, and I was like hopeless. Like I looked out ahead and thought, that doesn't look good. Like that doesn't look appealing. That doesn't look satisfying. And this is like the rest of my life. There has to be more. That's what I thought to myself. There has to be more than this. And I believe that I didn't know that this is what was happening, but I believe God heard that as a prayer. I think that was the first time I ever actually prayed, because I was reaching out to something or someone beyond myself. So from there, God began to just send people my way, and it was through relationships, entirely through relationships. Some other people who were kind of seeking in their own ways, and other people who were followers of Jesus inviting me into different things. So like campus life kinds of things, like Youth for Christ and youth groups, and different things like that. And it was through. It started with a Bible study at a Youth for Christ group. The Youth for Christ leader invited a few guys, said, "Hey, you guys, you want to come and do a Bible study?" And I was like, "I've never opened the Bible in my life, but sure, why not? Because I like these guys, and let's do it." And I remember sitting and chatting with Tom, and studying the book of John, and which was great. And then eventually, I was working over at Richard's restaurant.
Wow.
And this girl started working at Richard's restaurant, and she and I started to hang out and became friends, and she invited me to her youth group. And I went to this youth group, and the youth pastor just immediately took me under his wing, and he began to tell me all about this Jesus, and he began to just walk with me through life and mentor me and all kinds of things. And there's one particular night at his youth group, I'd go out every Wednesday night, this one particular night where he clearly shared the gospel, clearly shared this is who Jesus is. And this is our sin nature. This is the brokenness of each of us. And this is what life in Jesus looks like. And he explained the whole thing and invited people to receive Jesus as their Savior. And what would always happen at youth group was there was the youth group time, and then there was a little break, and then like an after party that happened kind of close by where the church was. And he invited people to come at the end of the youth group time to receive Jesus, and I hightailed it out of there. And I was like, no, hey, I'm not doing this. I don't know what I think about all this. And I kind of freaked out. And I just left and went over to the after party. And the youth pastor then came and found me later. And he was like, hey, when we were talking about this, like your eyes were as big as saucers. What's going on? And so we sat down in the midst of this whole party. We sat down and just had a conversation between he and I, and we talked more about Jesus and who he is and what it means to follow him. And then he asked, "Are you ready to receive him as your Savior?" So it was in the middle of this party that I said, yes, I'm ready. And I prayed and received him as my Savior. And I remember then leaving the party in the youth group that night. And this girl that had brought me, she and I were standing outside as we were about to leave, and I told her, I was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I accepted Jesus," like really casually. And she was like, "What? You accepted Jesus? That's incredible." And I'll never forget it. She looked at me, she said, "Rob, do you understand that right now there is a chorus of angels erupting in a party in heaven over you?" And I was like, "No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all."
Oh, cool.
And she said, yeah, no, not just like in general, like over you right now. And I wept. I was like, "You got to be kidding me. That's amazing." And got my car and left. And it was from there. I don't know if it was right away, but it was sometime pretty quickly after that I remembered that moment where I went, there has to be more to life than this. And I just had this sense, like the Holy Spirit kind of nudged in and was like, there is, and it's Jesus. It's following Jesus is the path to this more and better and abundant life. And my life has just never been the same. And that girl that invited me to the youth group is the girl that I ended up marrying. So she was the girl that I started dating in high school, and then we got married a few years later.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. What age was that, roughly?
So I was probably, I think it was my junior year of high school, so I was probably 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Was that a First Church of God youth group?
So that was at Big Lake Church of God.
Okay.
That's where I went to youth group, and then I came to First Church on Sunday mornings.
Okay.
So Sunday morning here, and sometimes I would do the youth group here, but most of the time I was doing youth group out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I've got roots that go way back at First Church.
And then, like, 20 years later, you came back?
Yeah. So that would have been in, well, let's do quick math here. That would have been like in 1997, and I came back we came back in 2021.
Wow.
So
24
years later. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's crazy how God works
Yeah.
in those ways. Let's rewind. Let's lighthearted a little bit.
Sure.
What do you like to do for fun?
Ooh, what do I like to do for fun? That's a good question. I'd say a lot of what I do for fun revolves around family. Mm-hmm. My wife and 2 kids. My kids are my son, Caden, just turned 18, and my daughter, Claire, is 15. She'll be 16 this July. And so just we like to do things together. Mostly it's like pretty low-key stuff. Like we love like cooking dinner together or playing games together as a family. Recently, we have all converged. We've all had different times where we have enjoyed like exercising in different ways. But recently, we've all like enjoyed running some, like all 4 of us. So we've been like doing races together, like 5Ks. And I think my wife just today signed us up for a 10K. Actually, 2 people are doing a 10K and the other 2 are doing 5K. So things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite sports teams, favorite movies?
Yeah. We were talking about sports teams earlier, and it was a mixed bag over here with you 2. I remember being a young kid and walking up to my friend Matt Moore. His brothers are over at Grace, Mark and Scott, in the athletic department there, but they were tiny little boys. And I went over to my friend Matt's house. I was probably I bet I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. And I walked up to the door, knocked on the door, and his dad opened the door. And I said, hey, I'm here to hang out with Matt. And he said, son, Indiana or Purdue? And I looked past him through the door, and I saw a bunch of Indiana stuff, and I was like, Indiana, sir. So from that moment, I've been an Indiana fan. That was my moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wise.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And I've grown to have a passionate dislike for Purdue, which as does any diehard Indiana fan.
From that day.
From that day. Yeah. From that day. Thanks to Jack Moore.
Some people would not say thanks to him, but
right.
that's okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah. Got any professional sports teams?
Less. I think I follow professional sports less. Right now is about the time that I start to pay attention to the NBA. Is about the finals. Sometimes we'll watch the Eastern and Western Conference finals, but yeah, usually about the finals is when I'll watch. So I'm sort of interested. I was sort of interested in watching LeBron break the scoring record, all-time scoring record. I'm sort of interested to see if he and Bronny are going to end up playing together. Yeah. So, like, if they do, then I probably would watch 1 or 2 of those games.
Yeah.
Football, I historically have been a Colts fan, but they are
bad.
They're bad. They're hard. They're hard to like right now. So that is, I would say that is maybe in hibernation would be my love for the Colts. When I moved to St. Louis, I grew up a Reds fan in baseball, and with a little bit of Cubs sprinkled in. But then I moved to St. Louis, and as you can imagine, the die-hard sports fans in St. Louis are Cardinals fans. So I did switch. I said, if I'm going to switch an allegiance, I'm not going to be a Rams fan. That turned out good for me.
Yeah, good.
Yep. And I don't really have much interest in hockey. So I lived there 15 years and never once went to a Blues game, which seems silly, but it just never did. Not without opportunity. It just never happened, right? So I switched allegiances from the Reds to the Cardinals, and I would say that I'm still a Cardinals fan.
Okay.
Yeah. But this year, they're miserable. They're hard to watch.
I wouldn't know,
yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah. I think you would. Do you follow baseball?
Not as much as I used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that the NL, whatever it is, Central, whatever division the Cubs and Cardinals are in is pretty mediocre this year.
Yeah.
It's not the worst division in the league, though.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So does that mean you're a Cubs fan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so Cubs and Cardinals, that's a rivalry like no other.
Like IU and Purdue.
Mm-hmm. I would argue IU Purdue is deeper.
It's deeper, but that's how you'd most compare it.
Okay. Yeah, it gets pretty nasty.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to a Cubs Cardinals game, it gets chippy in the stands.
Yeah. Question: you were at a church in St. Louis.
Yes.
Now you're at First Church.
Uh-huh.
What are some differences in those churches? Now, obviously, you have a bit different roles, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
What are some differences or similarities?
Yeah. So the church that I was at in St. Louis was when I first started in St. Louis. At the church in St. Louis, it was a church very, very similar to First Church, maybe a little larger, but not a ton larger, and a little bit different context because it's in a bigger city, a suburb of a bigger city. Okay. So some things like that. But then the church grew and became a multi-site church. So it was one church that met in multiple locations around the city. So that was the biggest difference. I mean, that really changes the nature of the church as a whole when you're doing multi-site ministry. So for the longest time, I was a youth pastor overseeing the youth ministry across different campuses. So I was really working with a bunch of different youth pastors at a bunch of different campuses.
The main youth pastor.
Yep. Yep.
So you would travel to the different youth groups, different nights.
Yep. Some different nights, and some of it was just kind of coaching and training and developing the youth pastors through the week. Yep. And then they did their thing and did a great job. And then I spent most of my time with students at the main campus. Okay. Yeah, so I think that would probably be the big difference. But yeah, lots of similarities, and just in the sense of like it's such a great group of people. That's the part of what I just love about church is it really is a community of people who, by and large, are chasing after Jesus and wanting to follow him and follow him deeply and really do want to dig into God's word and grow and develop. And so there's lots of those kinds of similarities of just a group of people that we just love deeply and loved our family at the Crossing in St. Louis and have come to love in a very short amount of time the family here at First Church. Just love the people here.
Mm-hmm. Did your role develop at that church?
It did. Yeah. Okay. When I first started, like I said, it was just one campus, and it was the youth pastor hired me because the youth group was just kind of getting big and he needed some help. So I came on as just kind of his associate student pastor and worked alongside him. And then his role changed, and he began to oversee some other things. So then I stepped into the youth pastor pastor role at a single campus church. And we hired a few staff, and so my role developed as the church grew, and we had to just continue to scale. And then when we started launching campuses, then it was like, yeah, we're scaling at a whole different level. And then by the end, the last few years, I transitioned out of youth ministry, and I was the campus pastor at one of the campuses. So then oversaw one of the campuses that launched the newest campus. Was a part of helping get the building built and hire all the staff and get the thing off the ground.
Yeah. What all goes into launching a campus?
Oh, man. It depends on the church. A lot of churches do it. Lots of different churches do it lots of different ways. Yeah. But for us, it was really. It began with identifying one of two things. Is there a geographical area of the city that we were saying, I think this is an opportunity for us where there's some need that we can step into. So really thinking church planting kinds of things. So we were really looking at that, but we were also looking at our other campuses and going, are there any other campuses that are at a size that it might be good to split off and say, let's launch off of a current campus, because that campus is pretty big. We're probably not going to expand their building. We're going to launch another campus somewhere similar geography where people then can go to that campus, and that was sort of the growth process there. So at the beginning it was identifying those kinds of things, and then we found a location that kind of fit within all of those ramifications, or all of those kind of grids that we were looking through. And then it was the process of building the building, and there was we had operations kinds of people that were doing that, and I got to just kind of watch that happen and be a part of that in some ways. And then it's a matter of spending a lot of time in the campus that we were launching off of, to get to know those folks, to identify some people that were like, we want to be pioneers. We want to be people to now go over to this campus and invest in this area of the city and really begin to draw people in and help people come to Jesus and all of that. So spent a bunch of months at that campus building relationships and finding leaders and people that wanted to come over. And then when it's launch time, then we're hiring some staff and getting ministries ready to go, and youth ministry and children's ministry and all that, and then we're off to the races.
How long is that process?
So it was probably, I'd say, about a year, 18 months from the first time that we really said, yes, we're going to do this. Yeah. We've been talking about it for a couple years, and then when it was official, yes, we're going to do it, and I was invited into it and saying, we think that we'd like for you to do this. It was about 18 months.
That's something like different than you've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Was it scary?
Yeah, in some ways. But it was more exciting than anything. Like it was invigorating in so many ways of just like going, we have no idea. We're going to dream and we're going to get to cast vision and really tell a big story to people and invite people in and it was really faith building because it was like we don't know what we're doing and we don't know what this looks like, and it was hard. There were bumps along the way. There were difficulties along the way. There was, people really wrestling with whether or not they wanted to but we love our campus. We love our church, and I'm not sure if we want to go. And so it was harder than we thought. We thought, this will be easy. People will be ready to go. But this campus had done such a good job at building community that they had just loved it there. So it was more challenging than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Which was a good challenge, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, you want people to call a church home and not want to leave.
Yeah. We don't want a bunch of people going, finally, I'm out of here.
New campus, let's go.
Let's get out of here. This one stinks, man. Yeah. No.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So that's kind of a big transition in that church. Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Speaking of transitions, our church is in a transition
Yes.
now.
Yes, we are.
What that transition is finding a senior pastor, and you're pretty involved in that.
Yeah.
What goes into that process of finding a new senior pastor?
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah. Which is good. You don't want it to be quick and easy and just pluck
That's
a
right.
guy.
That's right. Yeah. So it's another experience I've never been a part of. So I've worked at 3 churches now, and been in ministry for 20 plus years, and I've never been in a situation where I've been in a church that transitioned to senior pastor. It's my first time. Even the churches that I attended in high school and even in college, I never experienced a senior pastoral transition until now. So it's brand, So it's brand new experience for me, even just as somebody attending a church, let alone in sort of leadership. So what goes into it is a number of different things. What we've done, I mean, that's probably the best way to talk about it. What we've done is we've first identified that we probably need some help from an organization that can do some upfront work for us. So we engage with a national organization that does this a ton. They help staff the church, and they do some coaching and consulting, and then really they search. They use their networks nationwide and really even globally in some senses to find the right person for you. So in order to do that, there's been months long work working with them to develop what is called a church profile, which goes through everything from theology to some of just the values of the church, to demographics, to the what's the community like, a bunch of different things like that to really paint a picture of this is First Church of God. And this is who First Church of God is looking for to lead them, because this is who they are. So lots of work with our leadership team, with our staff, asking questions and filling out some surveys and some different things like that. So the person that we're working with in this search firm, Rob Bergman Search Group, he's done a great job at putting all of that together. So then what happens from here, and this is about where we are in the process now, is he takes that information and he begins to now engage with the different people that he knows, and sort of puts it out in the networks of Vanderbloemen, which is really wide, deeply rooted, and begins to search for people for us, running them through this church profile grid and going, this is who this church is. And they're thinking through, does this person fit? And then the person gets to kind of engage with that as well. And if there's a mutual agreement that, this might be a good fit, then they'll what Vanderbloemen will do is bring about 3 to 5 candidates to our search team. So we've identified a search team, which is a few people from our leadership team and some lay leaders. There's 7 people on that team, and they will now begin to get batches of candidates where they will process through those candidates and think through again the church profile and knowing who we are and kind of the nature of the person that we're looking for. And then they'll interview some people, and then if they get down to somebody where they go, I think this is a good person or two that we really need to consider, then they'll pass those people along to the leadership team. And then the leadership team will continue that process until we get down to one person that we really feel like God's leading us to this person. And then we'll bring that person in to preach and to present to the congregation, and then ultimately affirm with a vote.
Wow. That was very clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's detailed. I like that.
Yeah, we've tried to be really thorough, but also we've tried to kind of have a way that we can communicate it clearly, because we do want people to know that it's thorough. This isn't just, well, I mean, do you know anyone, or do you know anyone? I mean, I guess we'll, how can we do this? Yeah, I got a cousin over in Arkansas, and so we gotta make sure that we're really looking far and wide and really praying through this and going, God, would you lead us through it? So that's the underneath it all. It's the foundation of prayer. Right? We've called our church, and many people know this. We've called our church community together to say, let's bathe this thing in prayer and ask the Holy Spirit to lead in every bit of it, from the search firm to our search team to the interviews and the conversations that happen. The whole thing, let's bathe it all in prayer.
Yeah. Were you on the opposite end of that when you got hired onto here? Is this
in some way, yeah.
Same kind of company that?
It was a similar process minus we didn't use a search firm. It was a situation when I was brought on that there was a recognition of needing an executive pastor, and really it was even a recognition of needing some things that. Based on some conversations that I was having with a couple of our elders and a few people that I'd gotten to the place from my last church of going, I think that my wife and I, Rachel and I, were just kind of going, I think we're done. I think we're ready to move on. We're not sure what that means. We're not sure where that is, but I think we might be ready. And then maybe even let's look in this general geographical area, Northeast Indiana. So we were talking to churches in Fort Wayne and Warsaw and South Bend and kind of in Chicago, kind of all over this area. And then somewhere along the way, I began a conversation with some folks here, more in a consulting kind of a context where they were just asking some questions about here's where we are as a church, and the way the conversation went was I think really what you're looking for based on what I'm hearing is you need some leadership, you need some help when it comes to some execution of vision and different things like that. And typically what I see in churches is that role is an executive pastor. And they said, yeah, that's sort of what we've been thinking as well. Are you interested? And I was like, as a matter of fact, I think I might be interested in starting a conversation. So that's how that went. And then we, went through then a very thorough process of interviews and meeting people. And
how long was that process?
Let's see. So the process in terms of time was pretty quick. It was a couple months. And hiring pastors, oftentimes that's pretty short. But yeah, it was somewhere around the holidays, like post Christmas, and was when it really began. And then I started in early March. Okay. Yeah.
But you had to meet leadership team, elders.
Yeah, did all that. Yeah.
Pretty deep.
Yeah. Yep.
Did your wife get interviewed at all for that?
She was involved in some of that. Yeah, they got to know her. One of the things for us as a church is that obviously a husband and wife need to be on the same page, and you really need to understand where the person's wife is when it comes to ministry and just the nature of where her heart is. But we're very committed to we're hiring the pastor. We're not hiring their wife. So we're not dragging in a bunch of expectations on the wife, because sometimes a church can kind of feel like a husband-wife is a package deal. We're really kind of hiring both of them. And that's just not necessarily true.
But the supportive wife is important for sure.
Yeah. Got to be on the same page.
Yep. Yeah. You got a question?
What kind of made you want to pursue ministry as a career?
Yeah.
And then from that, I'm assuming that played a role in your college and everything. So why'd you pick what college you picked, and that whole idea of a question?
Yeah, great question. So then I came to faith my junior year of high school. And as you guys know, then kind of your junior, senior year is really where you're kind of starting to go, what do I want to do with my life in terms of a career? And so that was just a really fresh kind of thought process for me. And I just remember looking at this Hank was the youth pastor. I just remember looking at Hank and going, I see what he's given his life to. And I think when I look at myself and I look at the way that God has wired me and look at some of my passions and my giftedness and things like that, I think that's what I want to do. I think ministry is maybe what I want to think through. And then to the other part of your question of did that determine a college trajectory and what I studied and all that? Absolutely, because then I was going, well, so I'm 17 and I just received Jesus as my Savior, and I grew up in a home, irreligious home. I remember sitting with Hank in his living room as he was discipling me, and he would ask me questions like, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, what do you want to study? And I was like, well, I don't know, probably like the basics. And he was like, well, what do you mean by that? And I was like, well, I don't know what I mean by that, but like the basics. And he was like, well, I mean, I'm sure you know some of like the, Jonah and Noah's Ark and Abraham and Moses. I mean, you know a lot of that stuff, right? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Who are these guys you speak of? And he was like, come on, Rob, really? I was like, yeah, no, I don't know. He's like, you've never heard the story of Noah's Ark? And I was like, I don't know. No. So I'm 17 years old, and I never heard any of those stories. I never knew. So some dude got swallowed by a whale? Are you serious? That's amazing. Tell me more. In the Noah's Ark and the flood, and he was like, well, let me tell you about the rainbow and, and what that means. And I was like, no way. That's what no. Just every single story along the way, it was brand new for me. So it's in that context that I'm going, I think God's calling me to be a pastor. And somebody says, turn to the book of John, and I got to go to table of contents, man. I'm like, I don't know where that is. So I knew straight away I'm going to have to get some sort of biblical studies, some sort of theology degree straight away. So that's what determined I need to go to a Christian school. I need to study theology, biblical studies, and it was hard for me. My first college course was just a New Testament survey class. It was just the basics, like just skipping along the surface of the New Testament. I got a D. Because I was like, I passed, yeah. Boom. But I was sweating it to the end. Man, I was sweating it. Going, man, I'm not sure if I'm cut out for this because I'm getting a D in New Testament survey. So it was tough. And then I knew from there, 4 years of pretty intense study, then jumped into ministry, and I knew I wanted a little break. But I wanted to get some years under my belt and then go back and do some seminary work, some graduate work. And so a few years later, I went back to seminary and got a graduate degree in theology as well. Fuller Theological Seminary. Okay.
Where's that at?
It's in Pasadena, California, but I did it online. Yeah. Because we weren't going to move to Pasadena. It'd be tough. Be tough to do.
Online school is a beautiful thing.
It is. Yep, it is. It's also really difficult to have two small children and a full-time job and be doing a graduate program.
Yeah, wow.
But we did it. We made it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've touched a few ways God has worked in your life. But what's some other ways you've seen God work?
Yeah. This is a broad question, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask the biggest way you've seen because that's pretty subjective, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think for me personally, I've certainly I've certainly sat across the table from people. Even oddly enough, we're in my office, and this is a table in my office. I've sat at this table across from people, and I've seen the manifest presence of God show up and transform people's lives right before our eyes, and through conversation and asking questions and praying and digging into heart stuff and going, what is it that God needs to heal in somebody's heart? And because I believe that we can indeed be transformed. That God is still in the business of transforming lives. I believe it. I watch it. I see it happen. And I think that so often I just go back to how he's done that in my life. And so for me, it was, I get into my mid-20s now, and I had this really tumultuous childhood. And then a first couple of years of high school that were just a mess. And then praying that prayer of there's got to be more to life than what my first 15 years has been. And then God shows up and answers that prayer in such a rich, tangible way. And I go, wow, that's incredible. And it was like this honeymoon. Like it was just this beautiful first 5 or 6 years of just basking in the presence of God and just basking in the reality of new life. And then somewhere in my mid-20s, it was as if God said, okay, now let's go back because there's a bunch of hurt that you've experienced. It's what one author and pastor counselor author, his name's Dan Allender, he talks about this idea of broken shalom. And the idea of shalom is the base level. It's peace, right? But it means something way deeper. It's like this idea of wholeness. It's like when God puts everything together as it should be, it's shalom. Mm-hmm. And which obviously then is there's peace to that, and which is a beautiful thing. And but along the way, what Dan Allender talks about is that each of us have places along the way in our story and in our lives where we experience this shalom being broken shalom. And it's little things and big things along the way. It's cumulative things. It's all kinds of things. And so there was, a number of different things as I look back in my story that I recognize were these places of broken shalom. So I found myself in a counselor's office, and just began to process through my story, and found it was a Christian counselor, and he connected everything back to Scripture as we processed through all this stuff, and it was tremendous transformation for me, going into bits and pieces, going into my story in different ways, and him being able to say in moments where I saw just the worst of my home, where my dad is in handcuffs and getting carted off to jail, and just devastation happening right before my eyes, and him inviting me back into that and saying, no little boy should have to see his dad like that. That was not okay. And Jesus wants to step in, and he wants to grieve with you in that. And going to places like the story of Lazarus, if you guys know that story, where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And if you go through that whole story, it's a tremendous story where Lazarus is sick, and Mary and Martha call for Jesus, like, you got to get here. Lazarus is sick, and they believe Jesus can heal him, right? And for whatever reason, Jesus doesn't come. And then Lazarus dies, and then Jesus comes. And both, one after the other, Mary and Martha show up and go to Jesus and go, if you'd only been here, you could have healed him. And it's just a devastating story. And if if you know the end of the story, because I started with it, it's Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. He heals him. So we know what's going to happen. And Jesus, in his sovereignty, knows what's going to happen. You would think that in that moment, he would look at Mary and Martha and go, ladies, enough. Just stop. Just stop. And check this out. Poof. And heal him. But that's not how the story goes. And it's the shortest verse in the Bible, but one of them, such an important verse in the Bible, where Jesus, in that moment, weeps. Jesus wept. So he sits there, I think, two things. Number one, he's weeping with his friends because they're in anguish over Lazarus' death. And he's also weeping for himself, inside of himself, and saying, I am in anguish over the death of my friend Lazarus. So he sits there and he weeps. And the weeping comes before the resurrection. So I think that Jesus invites us into those places of broken shalom. And he says, I'll be with you, and I'll actually weep with you in those moments. And that's an important part of what it means to be human, is to weep through those moments of broken shalom. And that's a journey, years-long journey that my counselor we walked through, and tremendous healing occurred, and tremendous transformation in my own heart and in my own life. And so I get to sit across from people and engage in some similar ways with people, and get to watch the same kind of thing happen, where we're sitting here processing through something and allowing Jesus to weep with them, and allowing other people to go back and go, that you experience is not okay, and it's not the way of God, and that's not the way that Jesus intends for this world to be. We are living in a sin-marred, broken world, and Jesus wants to step into it with us, and it's transformative. So those are probably, there's hundreds of those kinds of stories, where is how I would answer the question of where I've seen God work the most.
Yeah, just the peace he brings.
Yeah. Yes.
Joy. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I love that answer. Very real.
Yeah.
And at this table.
At this table. In these chairs.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That question? No?
Not off the top of my head.
No? What?
Do I get to ask you guys questions? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
Do people do that?
Yeah, that's recently been what people do. Yeah.
Recently, people have turned that corner, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how old are you guys?
I'm 20.
20.
Both of you are 20.
Yep.
I'll be 21 in August.
Okay. So as 20-year-olds, obviously deeply invested in First Church of God, which is just beautiful. I love it. I just love your investment in this church, your investment in the other 20-somethings, your desire to bridge gaps, and that's this part of this podcast is what you want to do, which is so fun. Tell me, what is it about First Church that you love?
I grew up here, so I turned 3. My family moved from Roanoke to Columbia City to be closer to work. I went to Stepping Stones here.
The preschool, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep, wonderful preschool.
Yep.
And my buddies Brooks and Cam. Were you in my preschool?
I didn't go to preschool.
No? You can tell. But
He's a self-made man. He's self-taught.
But they're like, we go to church here.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't. What the heck? And so I went home, told my parents. We went to church here.
Yeah.
Been here ever since.
Is that right? Were you going to a church somewhere else? Or just not really going to church?
Chapel, I believe.
Okay, so you're going over to Fort Wayne.
Yep.
But now you lived here, and you're like,
well, we live
let's do this.
out by county line.
Okay,
So
sure.
but
Yeah.
anyways, and I loved the way people poured into me growing up through this church. I was very loved by, Amy J and Sunlight Club. Or no, she wasn't it was Holly.
It was Holly Sunlight Club.
She was Sunday morning. Amy
Sunday
J.
morning.
Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Middle school, Matthew Cable, Luke Deal, Kale. Many people poured into me. Now Jeremy, and just all of the pouring into. And I think this community just loves well.
Yeah.
Especially the youth. And
Yeah.
I'm a younger lad, so... I'm so sorry. I'm a younger guy. So I'm
a lad.
more
A lad.
close to that age still. So it's still recent, but just the way this church loves well.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's a lot of the same. I grew up here. Had people in this church changing my diapers back in the day. So, and then just going through all the elementary school, middle school, high school.
Yeah.
Just the love that I was shown and the investment from multi-generations in this church of just come together and love everybody so well, like Josh said. And then just with that being poured into my whole entire childhood, now being able to pour out into the younger generation even below us. And then, I mean, with the people that we're peers with too, this has been really cool to pour out what's been poured into me over the years, and just to see how much this church actually loves people really well.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly large church, and so it can be hard for large groups to be close. But I mean, we're called to go make disciples, so your church is naturally going to grow with the grace of God and as pursuing His will. But I think the small town feel really helps with that. You come in and you can talk to people, you can engage. It's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful
Sunday
thing.
morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, how are you? And just talking. I wish we had
a
longer time for that Sunday morning, but
So now, as a couple 20-year-olds, if you're talking to some folks that have maybe been around for a little while, and you're going, hey, like we're invested, we're gonna do this for another 60 years plus, like we got some time. If you were to now say to some of the rest of us, either this has to continue, or we have to begin to think about this, or this beautiful thing is going to start to kind of diminish and start to maybe kind of go away, what would be like sort of the warning that you would give to some of us older folks about, hey, listen, pay attention to this, in order to see to it that this church continues to be the beautiful thing that it has been for so long?
I would just be careful of conforming to the world. I mean, that's a trend a lot of even churches are going down, and it's sad to see because of the culture nowadays. It's not popular to love Jesus. This cancel culture stuff could give backlash. So don't be afraid. Don't conform to this world. So, I mean, definitely watch out for the negative use of media, that stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I really don't think there's, anything at our age you need to watch out for. I don't know. Well, how would you answer that?
Are you saying a warning for the older generation, or a warning for people our age?
For First Church of God, hey, we want to continue for many years to come. We want to continue to be a beautiful beacon of light and hope to this world, and that looks different as decades go by, right? And so as 20-year-olds, what can we learn from the two of you that it's like, hey, just the church needs to continue to look like this, or maybe needs to do a little bit more of this?
I think we need to continue to make sure that we're a multi-generational church. One person that really poured into me and Josh when we were growing up was Austin Ferguson, who is a man in his 70s, teaching 12-year-olds back when we were in middle school. And so often people don't have that, and having that has definitely changed my life. And just seeing how the older generation can lead the younger generation it's really cool. Especially in a church setting, because the people in the church love God a lot, and being able to pour that into the younger generation creates people that love God a lot. And so I think we just need to continue to have that multi-generational church of people pouring into people, whether that's a 20-year-old pouring into the 3-year-old class, or if that's a 6-year-old pouring into the 12th grade class. Like, we need that multi-generational church to continue, and we can't let that go, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah. Good.
I think we need to I think our church is very close, but just keep doing a good job with growing closer with we do a great fall fest. I think it brings people together. Summer Blast really brings people together and pouring into the youth. We need to keep being intentional, and I would say praying for ways we can even be more intentional with each other. Whether that looks like maybe small groups, more classes, stuff like that. Just really not being content with where we're at, but how can we seek God more? How can we grow His kingdom more? How can we live out, what we're called to do? Keep jumping at that. Don't be content with.
Get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
I come to church Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Which that is good. Yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah. But that's one of the things that I think I've just been so taken aback by is how, in a good way, is how invested the people of First Church are in this church. Deeply invested. And that's such a profound thing to see, is just how much people are, they care. They care about this church. They care about the future of this church. They care about the kinds of things that we're doing and how we are really attempting to follow God into our future and all of those kinds of things. People very invested. And that is, you harness that and point that in the right direction, and watch out, Whitley County, watch out. Yeah.
Speaking of being invested, forgot this question. What are you invested in? I know you serve with youth on leadership team.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some of your roles in that stuff? Yeah.
Yep. I do serve on our leadership team, and that's one of the things that for some people, like, oh, so what is that? What's the leadership team here at First Church? And our leadership team is made up of elders, stewardship, which is like a sort of the biblical function of a deacon, where they oversee the finances, and then our trustees are our facilities team, which is taking care of the actual physical buildings and property and things like that. So those three teams, there are some staff people that serve on each of those teams. So I serve as an elder and on the stewardship team. So that's that's one of the roles I play, and then as you mentioned, I get to serve with the freshmen going into sophomores. We host one of the Connect groups at our house, and we love it. Love having that group of kids over every Sunday. Well, not every Sunday night, but any Sunday night that's happening in homes, it's at our house. Yeah, so we love it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Is that different for you as you work in the church and then serve? Like, how do you separate those two roles, I guess?
I don't think I separate them. I think it's all one and the same. I think that as a pastor, I get to lead and serve in different ways. But this is also my church. So just like anybody else, we're inviting to serve and to use your gifts. And I've got quite a few years of youth ministry experience. So to get to dust that off and invest in the lives of teenagers again is like, what a gift. And very much just getting to lead a small group of soon to be sophomore guys and girls is just so fun. So I think it's connected in many ways. Yeah. And then soon enough, in this fall, there'll be a class or two that I'll begin to teach on Sunday nights with some adults. So a little teaser there. Okay. Stay tuned.
Wow,
that's coming.
Sneak peek.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Holy cow.
You heard it here first. Yeah.
That's
so we're excited about that. It's a kind of a video-driven course connected to. I taught it even before it was a video-driven course. But connected to Jesus' prayer in John 17, when the night he was betrayed. He is praying for his disciples, he's praying for himself, and then he's praying for the people that will come to follow, which is us in years to come. And he prays for some really specific things. And a lot of that's connected to unity and what that means to be a unified body of Christ, to be one. And that, I think, is an important thing to be talking about right now. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Is that a summer?
This fall.
This fall.
Yeah.
How will you do youth group and that class?
So we got a great group that lead the sophomores. So I'll just be in and out a couple times when that class is going.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Really good.
Oh yeah, we'll figure it out.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
As we wrap up, we ask all our guests the same closing question.
It's a make or break question.
Is it really?
I know you're going on a trip soon. You said New York City with the family.
Yes.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
What is your dream trip?
A dream
vacation.
Dream vacation.
You can go anywhere in the world. You can travel any way you want. You can teleport if you want. You can bring whoever, do whatever.
Yeah.
Spend as much money as you would like. Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I got to spend 3 weeks one summer in a bit of an mini exchange role in Paris.
Wow.
And ever since then, I have wanted to go back, and I've wanted to take my girlfriend and then my fiance and then now my wife. I wanted to take my wife back to Paris. So the dream trip, the dream vacation is to take my wife to Paris.
What would you do there?
All of the things. What
wouldn't you do there?
What wouldn't I do?
What wouldn't you do?
Yeah. All of it. Would eat at all of the cafes, and we would eat our way through Paris. Just delicious food. We would go to the museums and the cathedrals. We would do the Eiffel Tower. We would do it all. We would find our way out of the touristy kinds of areas into the place where the locals go and all of that. It would be it would be lovely. And we're planning it. We're focused on, we've been married now for this December will be 23 years. We're looking at like our 25th.
Wow.
Would be the Paris trip.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was she your girlfriend when you went in high school?
Yeah, that was the very beginning. Wow. Like I think we had just sort of started dating. And then when I got back was really when it was like it ramped up and like, let's make this thing official.
You couldn't really contact her when you were in Paris.
No, yeah. That was back in the day, back before WhatsApp and all of the ways that you can get in touch. So it was sayonara, see you in 3 weeks.
Dang.
Yeah.
Was she jealous?
She was excited for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, sweet. This has been really good, Rob. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for your time and your openness. This has been cool. I hope church family gets to know you a little bit better from this and hopefully connect with you.
You bet.
In your life. Yeah. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
That's it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you. That being said, it's been the Outreach Project. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Say peace.
Peace.